For many years, the European continent in the early 19th century reckoned with a single man, Napoleon Bonaparte. Young, bold, and ambitious, Napoleon embarked on an audacious quest to tip Europe towards France. Napoleonic France would challenge Imperial Russia, the British Empire, the Ottomans, the papacy, and Spain. Aware of this challenge, various European empires and powers would embark on diplomatic efforts to not only fight Napoleon, but to project their own geopolitical goals and desired worldview onto others. The Congress of Vienna, convened between 1814 and 1815 in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, stands as one of the most consequential diplomatic gatherings in European history. Attended by the great powers, Britain, Prussia, Russia, and restored France under Talleyrand, it set out to reconstruct a stable European order after 2 decades of revolutionary upheaval, territorial revision, and mass warfare. Under the guiding hand of Metternich, and with significant British input from Castlereagh, the Congress established a territorial settlement designed to contain France, compensate the victorious powers, and restore a rough order among the major states. This is diplomatic history. We focus on diplomacy, relations, and communications between states and other political actors. It is a dynamic field where historians explore the ways in which diplomacy does or doesn't occur. Today, I will give a brief overview on what diplomatic history is, the differences it has with political history, and an outline for new diplomatic history for the 21st century. For now, let's begin. I'm Madeleine Rose-Jones, and I study history, literature, and culture. Welcome to Snowy Fictions. Diplomatic history is the study of how states, empires, and political actors have conducted relations with one another across time through negotiation, alliance building, treaty making, and the calculated exercise of power. It is one of the oldest subdisciplines within historical scholarship, and rightly so. Wherever organized political communities have existed, so too has the need to manage relations between them. The discipline spans all of human history. Ancient Egypt negotiated the Treaty of Kadesh with the Hittites. Byzantine emperors wielded diplomatic ceremony as an instrument of soft power. Renaissance Italian city-states developed the permanent ambassadorial system that underpins modern international relations. Diplomatic history, therefore, is not new. See it as a thread running through every era and empire, adapting form while preserving its essential function. Central to the discipline is an understanding of statecraft, the art of managing a state's interests through deliberate policy, shrewd calculation, and the cultivation of strategic relationships. Diplomatic historians consider treaties, yes, but they also examine the intentions behind them, the pressures that shape them, and the consequences, intended or otherwise, that followed. This careful emphasis on international relations, considering how the distribution of power, competing national interests, and ideological conflict shape the behaviour of states towards one another. The Napoleonic Wars offer a defining example. The Congress of Vienna, as stated earlier, was not merely a peace settlement, it was a masterclass in multilateral diplomacy, where Metternich, Castlereagh, and Talleyrand collectively reconstructed the European order on principles of a balance of power and conservative legitimacy. Understanding why that settlement held for nearly a century, and its eventual fracturing, requires the precise kind of structural, relational, and ideological analysis that diplomatic history at its best provides. Political history and diplomatic history are close relations, not rivals. Political history is a broader discipline, with its concerns about the exercise of power, the formation of states, the dynamics of governance, and the ideological contests that shape political life. Diplomatic history operates within that field, narrowing itself to the international relations side of politics. The distinction was one of emphasis. A political historian examining the Napoleonic Wars might foreground the internal dynamics of the French state, the firming of Bonaparte's authority, the tension between revolutionary ideology and imperial ambition, the mechanisms by which Napoleon sustained domestic legitimacy while prosecuting near-continuous war. The focus falls on power as it is organized and exercised within and through political structures. A diplomatic historian, by contrast, would orient the same material outward. Concern shifts to how Napoleon's ambitions registered in the calculations of other powers, how coalitions formed and dissolved, how British strategic interests diverged from Prussia, while the Congress of Vienna represented a concerted effort to reconstruct an international order that French expansionism had shattered. Both political and diplomatic history need one another. Diplomatic history without political context is a mere chronicle of negotiations stripped of the forces that drove them. The two modes of historical inquiry are not competing frameworks but complementary angles on the same fundamental question. How do political actors acquire, exercise, and contest power? Diplomatic history, as I'm sure you've made aware of, focuses mainly on state actors, the ambassadors, diplomats, politicians, and statesmen and women. Yet history and how diplomacy operates frequently transcends the games between state powers. Emerging as a field in the late 20th century, new diplomatic history asks who else mattered to international relations. It incorporates cultural history, transnational movements, non-state actors, public opinion, and the role of media in shaping how diplomatic realities constructed and perceived. The contrast between the Napoleonic Wars and the Arab Spring illuminates this shift sharply. Vienna in 1815 was negotiated by a handful of aristocratic statesmen operating through formal channels largely invisible to ordinary Europeans. The Arab Spring, by contrast, unfolded in the full glare of social media, where non-state networks, diaspora communities, and international NGOs exerted genuine pressure on diplomatic outcomes. This meant the overall diplomatic picture involved Twitter feeds, refugee movements and advocates, and transnational humanitarian lobbying. We can also notice the terror and diplomatic woes brought on by the Islamic State, or ISIS, as well as the turmoil and suffering experienced by religious minorities such as the Yazidis and the Christians of the Middle East and North Africa. New diplomatic history, therefore, contextualizes statecraft with a messier, more populated world in which diplomacy actually occurs today. I intend for this video as a short introduction into diplomatic history. Yet, if you want to dig deeper, you should pick a historical era you are interested in, such as the early 19th century in Europe, and investigate the many ways states interacted with one another. I made several references to the Napoleonic Wars today, and there is a reason for this. During these many years, Europe saw many great powers interact and deal with one another. British Empire, Russia, the Ottomans, the Spanish, and Imperial Russia. And this is what I love about diplomatic history. It opens the door to other nations and empires, and once you start reading about a war or a conflict through a diplomatic history lens, you often find yourself caught up in the geopolitics and drama of it all. Therefore, diplomatic history is truly a field to treasure. But back to you. What are your thoughts on diplomatic history? Have you studied the Napoleonic Wars? And if so, what aspects interested you the most? I'd love to know your thoughts, so comment below and let's start a discussion. Please subscribe for frequent content on history, literature, and culture. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Goodbye for now.